Hi Neha, welcome to the Smart Immigrant Podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Simon. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me as a guest here. I'm super excited.
I think Orkut became defunct when I was in high school or something.
Okay.
This is like legal immigrants with coming with spouses who are equally or sometimes even more capable than the H1 holder, who can actively be a participant in the economy.
So I took a 600-page document to the OMB, okay? And there were 25 people who came with me from all over the US, all of them first-time H4 EAD holders, right? And we were able to prove that just within that room of 25 people, we had created 150 jobs.
Pretty much every Indian party doesn't become complete without a conversation of priority dates and green card backlogs and immigration statuses and competition about priority dates and stuff like that.
Yes, 100%. And kudos to her for putting in so much effort. In fact, she and I chatted on my podcast too about it, about her movie, and the amount of work that she's put in. It's just amazing, and the kind of stories also that she kind of chased and brought them together.
We have a mutual friend Vidyut who has made a movie,
Yes.
and I really commend the amount of effort she has put into this. Hi Neha, welcome to the Smart Immigrant Podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Simon. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me as a guest here. I'm super excited.
I don't know where to start, to be honest. You're an immigrant advocacy person, you're a stand up comedian, you have come so far in the industry as well as a journalist. Where do we start from? I want to start from your immigrant journey, but you tell me.
Yeah, sure. I think that particular point was a changing point in my life. The day I decided to be an immigrant in the United States of America kind of changed a lot for me, changed my entire trajectory of my life. So I guess, yeah, let's begin with that.
Yeah, I don't think your story is one of a regular immigrant. This is a slightly different one. So I want to dive a little deeper into where you're from. How did you move to the US? Let's start from there. And then I'd love to go into what you know about the immigration space, not
Okay.
as a legal expert really, but from the behind the scenes person who is working in advocacy groups and who sits with a lot of policymakers to discuss with them, etc. But let's start with who you are as a person.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'm not a legal expert at all. I'm someone who's just been through the system and has kind of been at the receiving end of things a lot, which is why I kind of happen to know a thing or two. And I'm that kind of a person who just wants to make everybody else aware. So, hi, I'm Neha. Born and raised in New Delhi, got married and followed my husband for his dream on H4 visa. Listen, that was back in 2008. Okay, that might seem like in another era altogether, but in my mind, it happened yesterday. Okay, and when that happened, when the first letter. When the H1B got selected, right? And the intention from my husband's employer was like, dude, you need to go. You need to go like right now. My interest was, dude, what am I going to do? I was a journalist in India working for a pretty well-known group, right? And I just didn't know what I would do with my life there. So, but I was hopeful. I was like, okay, worst scenario, I go intern somewhere and I learn. And listen, it was never our intention to live here this long. And I'm sure everybody would resonate with that because we come with that intention. Nobody wants to just, build their home family here. We come with an intention, okay, let's go, let's figure it out, let's test the waters for a few years. And if we like it, we'll stay. Otherwise, it's a big vacation. That's all, right? We'll work and play. So that was the intention with which we came here. Back in the day, there was no Facebook, no Instagram. There was something called Orkut. I don't know if you guys are ever familiar with that at all. And there were no.
I stopped using that. I think Orkut became defunct when I was in high school or something.
Okay. So there was no information about H4 visa. And me being a journalist, I wanted to learn as much about H4 visa as I could. The only website that I kept landing on was the USCIS website. And listen, we all know even best of the attorneys can't decipher the language on that website. It's just so hard, right? there was another website called Track It, where people would put in their situations, and but all of it was geared toward H1B. There was no information about H4. I had extended family here, but they were also not very vocal about their struggles.
And
I
which
guess
year was this?
2008.
Was this before the recession or the great, the what's that called?
I very, dramatically would like to tell you that my husband landed on the day Lehman Brothers epic
Wow.
fall happened,
Wow.
March 17th or 18th. You can cross check that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the day he took the flight to the US. And within a day, we hear about Lehman Brothers crash and the massive crash that we went into, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there was no information about H4 visa back in the day. And when I landed in the US, I was like, okay, let me go figure out some internships. But everywhere I went, they wanted a social security number, and I had to sign a document in Social Security office saying that I am okay to not apply for a social security number, right? And you don't exist in America if you don't have a social security number. It's as simple as that. For the longest time, I was dependent on my husband to go get my driver's license, to open a bank account, to get a credit card in my own name. That was hard because I didn't have a recurring income coming in, of course, right? And even at the it's funny. I got my green card finally in 2022, and from 2008 till pretty much till 2020, 2021, whenever I needed a driver's license renewal, I had to go with my husband to prove to the DMV in person, the motor vehicle commission, that this is the guy I married, this is the marriage certificate, this is the visa I'm on, and he's here with me. I had no identity of my own, even after all these many years. So that was the story, and I realized, we were living in apartments, and I realized there were so many women around me who were just happy being stay-at-home moms. Nothing wrong with that, okay? If that's something you've chosen to be, great. I mean, there's no judging there. But all these women were super accomplished. They were PhD holders. Many were scientists, researchers, and the like. And my only question to them was, why are you not thinking of working or going into your, area of expertise? And they would never give a straight answer. They're like, "Nahin, abhi, our green card is in the way. It's underway. It's going to happen." And little did I realize that everybody was on an H4 visa, and everybody was so ashamed to be on an H4 visa because everybody had this idea of coming to the US and living the American dream. Listen, America has done an amazing job at soft selling the American dream. Pick up any movie, pick up any media, pick up anything literally about America, and there's this larger than thou life about America, an American dream, right?
Was that your image of America too before you landed here?
I didn't know much. I really did not know much. Okay, I was very, very young. I was just maybe 25, 26 back then, right? And like I said, the world wasn't exposed to internet the way it's seen in the last few years, right? 15 years at least. So my understanding of America was, okay, it's America, right? Whatever I had seen through movies. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So most people maybe who are watching this show are relatively newer.
Yeah.
And they are probably used to seeing H4 EAD as a normal thing. Like it's, hey, who doesn't get an H4 EAD type thing? But can you walk us through how there was an era where this was not there at all, and what it took to even bring it on the table of legislation, of even the lawmakers, that, hey, this is probably worth having?
So, Simon, back in 2008, no one knew there was a possibility of an H4 EAD, right? And I think what we were fighting for was something called an I-140 EAD, an EAD that you can get as soon as you get I-140. That was the intention. That's what a lot of us were kind of championing the cause for, campaigning for. But as things turned out, and no one has control over how politics works, Obama administration decided to create H4 EAD instead of giving an EAD at I-140 stage. right? That would have been amazing. I mean, I know even today we are campaigning for an I-14080. That would make things so much more easier for so many of us, right? So I'm talking about an era when H4ED was not a reality. No one knew that us women could actually work. And I say us women because majority of women are direct recipients of H4.
Yeah, it's
Simply,
disproportionately a majority of the spouse category. Yeah.
there's actually a number, 94, 93, 94% of H4 visa holders are all women,
Mhm.
which is why it also becomes a woman's issue, right? And I, in my wildest dreams, would have never imagined that landing in United States of America, I would actually be thrown back to the 18th century, where we literally had no rights. Okay, and coming from India, where I was a journalist, I had my own bank account, I was driving since I was 16. This was a huge shocker, right? And but I never understood why this was, and more I started reading about it, researching about it, talking about it, and I worked with a lot of researchers. Dr. Pallavi Banerjee is one. Her book The Opportunity Trap is one, right? I'm quoted in that book. There's considerable mention of me and my story in that book, and like that there were many other researchers who've reached out to me in the past many years. And it's just beyond anybody's understanding that in the most developed nation on this planet, there's something called an H4 visa. And Simon, reality is, even till date, yes, H4EAD has become a reality. It became a reality in 2015. But even till date, there is still a section of H4 visa holders who do not get the work authorization. You have to qualify for it. There is a preset. There's a prerequisite for it, right? And even if you get H4EAD, uh, you all know when Trump administration came into power first time around, H4EAD renewals were just not happening. Absolutely not happening. I was on H4EAD then, and it took me at one time nearly a year
Wow.
to get 4EAD renewed. Imagine which employer would hire someone who has absolutely no control over their work authorization.
So it's like on paper you haven't taken away the H4EAD, but you have administratively made it so long. And
Yes,
I think we have this quote, right? Like justice delayed is justice denied. I think
absolutely.
that's kind of like the category that it heads into when administrative processing of certain types of benefits are like stretched too long.
Absolutely. And I think during Biden administration, that kind of became a little easy. We had the automatic revalidation of H4EAD. All of that was in place. Although there were little issues with that too, right? With the I-94 and everything. But now with the present administration, President Trump is back again in office, and we know his immigration policies, right? And everybody's very scared about what's going to happen. Forget H4EAD, even green card holders are scared on what's going to happen. I mean, you never know uh, how his policies are going to target green card holders who became green card holders within the Biden era. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. You're talking about you talked about landing in America and
Yeah.
feeling like you were transported back into the 18th century, right? One of the rebuttals I hear for that, and we hear quite a bit of this sometimes in our comments as well, is some citizens' rights activists generally, right? Like they come and they say that, hey, if we are finding it so difficult, why can't you go back to your country? And I mean, in the onset, that is a valid argument. It's like, it is a different country that you come to, and like you ask for a certain amount of rights over there. But at the same time, there's also an angle to this, which is people trying to assimilate into the country that they move to. And this is not a case where there's like illegal border crossings that's happening. This is like legal immigrants coming with spouses who are equally or sometimes even more capable than the H1 holder, who can actively be a participant in the economy, who probably are willing to do that and yet are not able to do it because of administrative limitations.
And Simon, that was one of the arguments to bring H4EAD. Really, the argument was that there is a talent pool that exists within the United States of America. There's no new people coming in, So we're not like adding on the burden of on immigration, right? So these people already exist. They are very talented, sometimes even more talented than their own spouse, right? But because of the way the lottery system is, luck comes into play. And I know many, many talented people who have gone through the lottery system and just did not get picked up. Okay, many people wanted to convert to H1, right? And it just did not happen. So, and to answer the question for those who believe that why come to US or why, listen, it's a human right. It's a basic human right. Come on. America is the harbinger of women's right, of gender equality. Okay. And when you talk about United States of America, whatever happens in United States of America kind of becomes the roadmap, the gold standard for rest of the world to follow. And if this is happening in United States of America, imagine what's going to happen in other parts of the world. It's as simple as that.
But then
This
there
is,
are buckets of people who are like, we don't give a damn about the other parts of the world.
well, you can exactly, but give a damn about what's happening in the United States of America, right? This talent pool is already here. So why not give them a chance to work and bring their talent? This was actually one of the questions we had to kind of rebut at the OMB, the meeting that we had back in 2018, where I led a campaign. I collected about 25 case studies from all over the US. All of these folks were first-time H4 EAD holders, and the narrative that we were fighting was that H4 visa holders, these H4 EAD holders, are taking away American jobs, right? With this campaign and the kind of people who thankfully came with us, and with the research that I carried. So I took a 600-page document to the OMB, okay? And there were 25 people who came with me from all over the US, all of them first-time H4 EAD holders, right? And we were able to prove that just within that room of 25 people, we had created 150 jobs. So the whole narrative that the H4 EAD holders are here to take away American jobs kind of just fell flat on its face. That's not the truth. H4 EAD gives so much more to an immigrant, right? Because it's one of the most unrestricted visas. See, H1B, you have to be it's an employment-based visa, so you have to cater to that kind of a prerequisite. But H4 EAD, you're your own boss. You could open an LLC, you could open a business, you could do literally anything under that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So see, the thing is, when something is about the law and about justice, there's a lot of evaluation of the facts that happen, and it's evaluated on the merits of the fact. However, this H4 EAD thing and the whole documentation that you took to them, it's more of a policy issue. It's not a law and order type of a justice issue. It's more of a policy issue at this stage, at least, right? It hasn't evolved to that point where it's a justice issue. So when it is a policy issue, we always have other narratives that come into play as well. It's not just what research proves that it does. It's also how it comes across to the broader public, whose political interests are served better than the others. So there could be a reality where everything scientifically and logically is checking the box that, hey, yes, H4 EAD folks create more jobs. They are able to create their own businesses, which create jobs. However, if the broader narrative itself is like immigrants are coming over and taking over everything, and if those are the types of people who have a political interest in actually peddling that narrative much harder, let's say,
Right.
if that is the kind of people that you take this research to, wouldn't it be falling on deaf ears anyway? Because they are not motivated by the facts over here.
Yeah.
They're motivated by a political agenda, which serves them.
So there are always two sides to a coin, Simon. Okay, no matter every theory on this planet would have two sides, and I'm not trying to convince anybody. My job is to just accumulate the facts and show it as is to help the cause. If anybody wants to listen to it and is inclined towards it, they would listen to it. And you said it's not a justice issue. I strongly believe this is a justice issue. We're living in 2025. Okay, we're talking about going to Mars and creating colonies there and all of that. Okay, and we are not able to, solve this simple riddle. It's not even a riddle. It's literally, it's all crystal clear. We know what needs done, and that cannot be done. So clearly there is a political agenda behind it, which is fine. But what I want to, through this podcast, want to tell people is when I came to the US, there were no podcasts like this. There were no news articles being written. Heck, even the interns or even the congressmen, the people at Congress did not know about green card backlog. I and many people like me have literally put in over a decade worth of blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that Congress knows about this issue. Okay. And if you call any office, any Congress office today, even an intern would know what a green card backlog is.
Mm-hmm.
Even an intern would know what an aging out kid means. No one knew it. No one knew it when I came to the United States. So a lot of work has been done, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done.
And Neha, a ton of people who follow us and our content, I'm sure will be resonating with this. And on behalf of all of them, thank you for everything that you've done to spread awareness. I know it's not an easy job to stay at it for about a decade, like the same cost, to keep pressing it and seeing it through, that there is some sort of an outcome that comes from it. Obviously, it's not the most ideal outcome or the most permanent outcome that we have reached until now. But this is kind of like an example where grassroots effort at the very bottom, like bottom up approach, truly in the long run creates enough incentive or maybe even political incentive for action to be taken.
I would just like to say that anybody who's listening to this today needs to know that they have all the resources in the world to make an informed decision. You know what you're getting into for real. There are plenty of media articles, there are plenty of podcasts, there are plenty of personal stories out there that are really telling you what's going on as an immigrant, as a high-skilled immigrant in the United States of America. Just getting that lottery doesn't do anything to you. The mental turmoil that you have to go through for decades, because let's get to the fact, there is still a 200-year wait for those born in India. And those of us who think, "Arey, unke saath hua, hamare saath nahi hoga," you are living in a delusion. No matter how skilled you are, even I have worked. Okay, so there was this case. I need to share this with you. There was this one doctor who came, when we ran these campaigns at the Hill. He would show up every single time. I don't want to take his name without his permission, but he was the only infant infectious disease expert in 200-mile radius in South Dakota.
Wow.
On H-1B.
Okay.
So think about it. He was not only saving lives in that sense, in literal sense, but also going through this insane paperwork year after year after year after year, stuck in the green card backlog.
Wow.
Right? There are hundreds and thousands of such stories. There are stories of kids who came here as babies, as 6-month-olds, and who grew up here. They do not know India as their house. They only know US as their home, right? India is nani dadi ka ghar for them. It is not, it's somewhere you go where extended family lives, and that's where you go. And people have had to self-deport or come find another way through a visa or, any other sources to continue staying here documented. See, and that's the problem, because when we hear the narrative, coming back to your earlier question of people being judgmental or this particular political narrative, right? What do we hear in the media all the time? We hear about border crossing. When we talk about immigrants, we only hear about border crossing. We only hear about the chaos at the border. And I'm not denying it. It is there, and those people deserve the justice too. But the point is that when you're clubbing two absolutely different issues together, it becomes a huge mess. So when, you go to USCIS's website or you talk to a congressman, the only thing that they say is, if you come here, or even the narrative in general public, come here with papers and you'll be taken care of. Hello?
Yep.
We came here with our papers.
Yeah.
What happened to that?
Yeah.
People are shocked, actually.
Exactly. So I think it's all being put into the same bucket of people coming illegally, people just staying over. And see, to be fair, I'm a very, very strong proponent of stopping all forms of illegal immigration. A country without rules on how many people can come in, how they should come in, etc., is not a country at all. That should be there, because only when that is there, it gives legitimacy to legal immigrants like us. If there's people on the other side just randomly pouring in somehow or coming in some way, or visa overstays and stuff like that, it kind of undermines the legitimacy of people who are doing it right. And then people go like, why should I even do it right?
Right. I mean, listen, there are people in real dire situations who are crossing the border and coming, and I have nothing against them. But there needs to be background checks. There need to be
Right.
certain level of checks and balances in place for that to happen. Here, the legal immigrant, the high skilled immigrant on a visa goes through that and continues going through that for decades at length. Okay, on an average, historically, people have gotten their green cards somewhere between 15 to 20 years if everything works out for those born in India. But these numbers are only increasing year after year after year. Like I said, right now the calculation of the wait time is somewhere around 200 years, and about 2 million people stuck in this green card backlog.
Mhm.
When is this gonna clear up, right?
Yep. I want to go into the mental turmoil side because there's a lot to unpack there. Most people don't understand it. But before that, let's just discuss a little bit about awareness.
Okay.
Why is it? See, I'm just comparing this to a lot of other communities who, when there is a certain amount of injustice that occurs with them, they speak out and they make sure that the world knows, whether it is in the US or abroad. I'm just talking about it from a global matter, right? They make sure that there is enough narrative that is feeding into the cause to protect their own interests overall. What is it with our community, the Indian community, that in general, we kind of become some of the top people, CEOs, etc., perform really well, get that multiple promotions in a year and stuff like that. But yet, when it comes to lobbying or when it comes to serving a cause like this, there's not too much mobility or momentum in the matter.
Sadly, that's the mentality of our community. Everybody just wants to not only close the door, but put a latch on it as soon as they get the green card and get to the other side. And then they start to lobby against what benefited them in the first case, right? You would be surprised the biggest hurdle or the opposition that came for H4EAD were from H1B visa holders themselves and green card holders.
Wow. What was their reasoning?
More competition in the market. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to our kids? And that was one of the, even if you go to the forums right now, like just go to Reddit, okay, and search up some of these keywords and see the kind of narrative. These are our own people who went through the system. Some of them got the green cards, however way they got it, right? And I don't want to get into this, but then we know how EB1C works.
Mm-hmm.
We know how some of the top companies in the US, in India-US market have made it so much more easier for not so capable people to get green cards the minute they land, right? Within a year or so, right? And the green card backlog does not impact them. So, and the other struggles, the struggles of other people really does not impact them at all, right? So that's just one category. But then even US citizens and green card holders, they're like, hame kya? We are living merrily. We have our benefits. We have other things to worry about. We don't want to worry about this.
Yeah, clean your house and put the trash out type of, it's okay if it litters the street, but it shouldn't be inside my house. Yeah, there's a certain amount of this. We have a mutual friend, Vidyut, who has made a movie. And I really commend the amount of effort she has put into this.
Those guys who are saying that we are taking away American jobs.
We don't want to.
We don't want to.
America has a secret weapon, the H-1B, the genius visa.
You present us with a challenge and it makes us both happy, with not immigration.
We have been approved for green cards since 2010. We are in backlog.
I mean, just like you have stood up for this cause for about 10 years now, I think she has done it in a parallel universe where she actually invested so much time, so much of her money, savings, all of that into making this movie to spread awareness in a much more grassroots fashion, in a way that it resonates with whoever is going through each one of those categories. And it's not like only one circumstance that fits the bill, right? Like there's so many in every life event or every step of your life, you kind of start feeling these issues, whether you go for a stamping and repeated stampings, or whether you go for that renewal, or you go, God forbid, your company has a layoff, and then again you have to start your perm process and stuff. Every walk of life, it's like I mentioned this a lot. Pretty much every Indian party doesn't become complete without a conversation of priority dates and green card backlogs and immigration statuses and competition about priority dates and stuff like that.
Yes, 100%. And kudos to her for putting in so much effort. In fact, she and I chatted on my podcast too about her movie, and the amount of work that she's put in. It's just amazing. And the kind of stories also that she kind of, chased and brought them together, especially about the guy in Kansas who got Srinivas, right? Who got killed in a shooting in Kansas. Now, these are realities of life, People think that, okay, think about it this way, Simon. There's a kid right now watching this. He's in 12th grade. He or she is in 12th grade in India, right? And they want to come to the US. And the only thing that they have in their mind is, oh, I have to go through this counselor and, I have to ask my parents for this amount of money and then, get through the school and get the admission somehow, land in the US. Like that's the only agenda in their mind. But they don't realize that's when the actual struggle starts. Because that kid who's right now on an F1 visa would graduate to be on an H1B. And once you hit that, there is this vicious cycle that you are in that just seems to be never ending. And so much that within a blink of an eye, 10 years pass, and that kid who is probably like 16, 17 right now is 28. Okay, a big chunk of their life has gone. Again, blink of the eye, they're still in the green card backlog. They're 30. Again, blink of the eye, they're still in the green card backlog. It's 40, 50. This is reality. I have seen 50-year-olds who came here as a kid.
Wow.
Who stuck in green card backlog. And all these years, what is their worry? Stamping. Okay. What if I lose my job? I will have only 60 days to, no matter how many years I've spent in the US, I would only have 60 days to find a job. Find me a job in this market. Please help me find a job in this market. There's so many people I know who've been laid off, right? And we've gone through this cycle in 2010 also. And then there are some other unforeseen factors. What if the main applicant dies? That's the reality of our times. Okay, there's so many people I know got killed in an accident or had a cardiac arrest or whatever.
And even the green card backlog is lasting a lifetime now. So now you have natural deaths probably also happening because people are waiting.
Yes. Why is there not an uproar about it? Why isn't our community coming together and talking about this issue? Which is why movies like what Vidyut made is so important. And even before Vidyut, there's this guy called Prakash Wadhwa who made this movie called From the Land of Gandhi. And there's this movie on Netflix, I don't know if it's still there, called From Hero to Go. That also is it's quite close to the life of a visa holder here in the US. And there's just so many more movies that are out there. There's another filmmaker I would like to mention, Meghna Damani. She's made an amazing movie. She's been working on a documentary also, Dreams Uprooted. So it's not that the work is not happening, but I think there's no collective efforts being made for this to happen. I think our people just feel very shy and are also very scared, because when you're on a visa, especially when you're on an H1B visa, which is what majority of our folks are on, they don't want to piss the employer. They don't want to be in a situation where the manager finds out that you've been campaigning and doesn't take it the right way. And then, you have to lose your job because of that. So but that doesn't happen. People are very understanding. Your manager would probably be the most support you would ever get in this situation. So my only request to anybody who's watching this podcast is please keep calling and sending letters to your senators, to your members of Congress, and talk to your American friends about it, because they have voting rights and they can actually make a change. If a member of Congress will not listen to you, they will probably listen to a US citizen.
Right. Right.
So create an uproar about it. I'm not saying go protest and go do whatever. I'm not saying that, but in a decent way. Go talk to your local members of. How many of you even know who's your, who's the senator of your constituency? Have you ever met them? Right?
Yeah.
So do that basic research. See, we come from India. We grew up there, and I joke about this a lot, that we are very used to living in comforts and outsourcing all our troubles to a third party. Kam wali bai aa rahi hai, dhobi aa raha hai. Blinkit say you're bringing stuff, Zomato, Swiggy, and all of that is helping you with your cooking also, right? Of your food on your table, putting food on your table. That's not happening in the US. Nobody is going to speak up on your behalf. You have to self-advocate. And that's what is being taught in the schools here too.
Thank you so much, Neha. Pleasure talking to you as always. And I'm sure people will be waiting for our next episode together.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And I'm really excited for that summit that you're planning in New York City. I can't wait to attend that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's going to benefit a lot of people.
Yep. See you there. Thank you.